C++ has a concept called functions, where it says if you have a group of instructions that completes a task, you can combine them as a function. But why would you want to do that? We can happily write all the code inside main and it will run fine. Let's take an example. We have written code to find an average of scores for a student. Now let's say you want to update the program to calculate the percentage of 2 more students. Let's test it out. Oh, we see some errors. The compiler is complaining about redefining variables. We can just initialize them to resolve the errors. The program works as intended. What if we want to check if the marks lie between 0 and 100 and print -1 to inform user that input was invalid? Now, we need to update each and every section of the code. We can already see 2 problems so far: variable name conflicts and modifying our code at multiple places. As the size of the main function increases, so does the number of variables. Our main function could, at one point, have hundreds of variables. It will become very confusing as to what each variable does and which piece of code uses it. For instance, if we forget to initialize the variable sum before the third piece of code, our output is entirely wrong. This will lead to unnecessary debugging. Now let's solve the same problems as before using functions and see if it is any better. A function is defined following the same syntax as the main function. First, tell what type of value this function returns. Since we want to calculate the average, a float in this case. Then the function name. We name it average. We want to pass a vector of scores to this function to calculate the average. We can give our parameters inside parentheses, separated by comma. A parameter is defined similarly as we define a variable. We can call this function anywhere in our program by its name, passing in an argument. Let's test it out. It works so far. However, no significant improvements than before. Now we calculate the average of 2 more students. The first benefit is apparent. We can quickly tell, glancing at our code, what it is doing, and not much code is repeated. Now let's update our function to return -1 if the scores are not in the range 0 to 100. This time it was swift. We had to change code in only one place. Let's test out the program. We get the correct result. The program behavior is the same, but we can tell it looks much organized and manageable. The function helps us in reusing the existing code at multiple places. The function helps in breaking down the problem into smaller, manageable tasks. Also, it is easier to modify the behavior in the future from just one place. If we want, we can even keep the older routine and define new functions for specific cases with new names. The function also avoids variable name conflicts, as the variable name is limited to function scope, and we are free to use the same name in other functions. Lastly, we would not run into the problem of forgetting to initialize a variable every time we perform the task, as it is initialized correctly whenever we call the function. For more programming videos, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment if you want me to cover any specific topic, and share with your friends. Thanks for watching.